Hey everyone, welcome to this video on ethical hacking interview questions. Ethical hacking is an integral part of cybersecurity, and it is gaining large prominence today with the increase in the number of cyber attacks. In this video, we will run you through the top 20 ethical hacking interview questions based on concepts like networking, software and programming, operating system and applications, cyber attacks, and cryptography. So let's get started. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon to never miss an update from Simplilearn.
Let's start off with question 1. What is a firewall? Now, this is a very good question, and normally a very basic answer that I've ever heard is that a firewall is a hardware and a software firewall. But that's the functionality of a firewall. That is how you can install a firewall. But there are different types of firewalls, and there is a specific functionality that a firewall is created for. Right? So a firewall is either a hardware or software, but its responsibility is for blocking either incoming or outgoing traffic from the internet to your computer. They secure a network. So essentially, the firewall will allow a connection to happen or disallow a connection to happen. It won't go beyond that. That's the basic functionality of a firewall. Okay. So based on the configurations that you have done, based on the rules that you have created on the firewall, it will then, based on those rules, identify whether some traffic is allowed in that network or some traffic is to be blocked from entering that network. So as the screen shows, the firewall rules will analyze whether the traffic is good. If yes, it will allow. If the traffic is bad, it will block the traffic and not allow that connection from happening in the first place. Now, there are a few common types of firewalls that also need to be included in the answer to this question. And the first one is a packet filtering firewall. These are the most common types that you will come across, which analyze packets and let them pass through only if they match an established security rule set. Now here people do get confused when we say that we analyze packets. People think that these firewalls will analyze the contents of that packet, which is not correct. When a definition for a packet filtering firewall says that these firewalls analyze packets, it means that they are only analyzing the source and destination IP addresses, port numbers, and the protocols that are mentioned in those packets. These firewalls do not have the capability of deep packet inspection, or DPI as it is known. If that capability comes into the picture, you're basically looking at an intrusion detection system or an intrusion prevention system in today's world called as a next-gen firewall. Okay, so a packet filtering firewall essentially will only analyze data packets for its source and destination IP addresses, port numbers, and the protocol that is being utilized. It will then map that information to the rules that are there on the firewall. And based on those rules, it will either allow that connection to happen or disallow that connection from happening. The second type is a proxy firewall. These firewalls filter network traffic at the application level. So when you say application level, they work at the layer 7 of the OSI model. Packet filtering firewalls, since we have mentioned that they work on IP addressing and port numbers, will work on the network layer of the OSI model. Also on the transport layer, because they also look at protocols. Proxy firewalls will work at layer 7, which is the application layer of the OSI model, and will deal with application level protocols such as HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, SMTP, and so on and so forth. And the third one is a stateful multi-layer inspection firewall. These filter packets at the network, transport, and application layers. So they basically do the job of the first and the second type of firewalls. The packets are compared to known trusted packets. But now the first question is, if there is a stateful multi-layer inspection firewall, why do we have type 1 and type 2 firewalls like packet filtering and proxy firewalls? That is because that is how the firewalls have evolved. We started off with the packet filtering, then we added functionality to it, and so on and so forth. So if a question comes, what is a firewall? You start off with the option saying it is a hardware or software. This is the responsibility, the functionality of a firewall is to allow good traffic and disallow bad traffic based on the rules that have been configured on the firewall. And then you've got basically 3 types of firewalls: packet filtering, proxy, and stateful multi-layer. And just include a brief description of each of these firewalls. So that's question 1. Moving on to the question 2. What is a VPN? VPN is also called a virtual private network. It is a connection between a VPN server and a VPN client. So it basically creates an encrypted tunnel between the client and the VPN server, which is then utilized to secure the connections that you're making with the internet. So as you can see in the diagram, the user has a VPN client installed on their machine. The VPN client then creates an encrypted tunnel to the VPN server, and through this tunnel, encrypted data is transmitted, which can then be processed by the VPN server, sent to the internet. Information can be received back by the VPN server. The VPN server will encrypt that data back and send it back to the user. So if there is a man-in-the-middle attack that is happening, or a hacker trying to eavesdrop on the communication mechanism, they will not be able to do so because of the encrypted tunnel. It is very difficult to decrypt this or hack through this encrypted tunnel. It is possible, but it is very difficult to achieve that. Then question number 3. How do you keep a computer secure? Now this is going to be a very generic question, so you want to put your best foot forward and you want to identify the most common methodologies on how you can keep a computer secure. So when we talk about computers, the first thing that you want to talk about is authentication mechanisms, where you want multi-factor authentication or two-way authentication to ensure that your accounts are kept secured. Now, if you look at using passwords, depending on how passwords are being stored by the application, password attacks can be possible, either a brute force attack or a dictionary-based attack, or even password guessing attacks are possible. To mitigate those kind of attacks, we need multi-factor authentication to ensure that accounts are kept secure. Now, even if we are using multi-factor authentication, we also want to look at secure passwords, which means that the password is complex enough to withstand most of the common attacks, and a brute force attack or a dictionary attack is just not possible. So we want to randomize our passwords. We want to create a complexity where a password meets standards such as has at least one lowercase, one uppercase character, has numerics and special characters, and is randomized, is not based on a dictionary word, doesn't contain usernames, email addresses, phone numbers, or anything that is personal to that particular user. Third, keep regular updates, which means that there will be patches that will be released for the application, for the software that you're utilizing. Download the patches, install them on a regular basis to ensure that you are secured against the most recent attacks that have been identified. Install a good antivirus. Could be an internet security suite, which will have an antivirus, intrusion detection system, a firewall, and will help you protect yourself against ransomwares, malwares, and any script-based attacks. Also have a specialized firewall on your system. Could be a host-based firewall or a network-based firewall to ensure that attacks are kept at a minimum, and you have your network definitions in place to allow or disallow connections from happening to your devices. Have anti-phishing softwares installed as well to ensure that you are not getting any spam mails. Even if you do, you're able to identify that and not fall prey or victim to those spam mails. Phishing attacks are generic, where they are directed towards individuals and they prey on the gullibility of that particular individual. So our Nigerian frauds, or the lotteries that we win on a regular basis of hundreds of $1 million, those messages, the emails that we receive, they are all phishing emails where they're basically prone to victimize the user and then rob them of money, or install some malware, or do some other malicious activity. If you want to enhance encryption about data that you have stored on your devices or on your or that is accessed by your software or being transmitted by your software, use encryption. Encrypt your data, whether it is at rest, whether it is in motion, or whether it is at use, thus reducing data leakage and data loss possibilities. And finally, and the foremost, secure your DNS. DNS is the domain name server, which is utilized by computers to resolve domain names to IP addresses. If a DNS poisoning attack is possible, where your DNS settings have been modified by an attacker and you're redirected to a malicious DNS server, that server is going to redirect you to another malicious application which may have a malware or a malicious software as a payload. Also, you don't want people to know your DNS servers and the queries that you're making, so you want to use secure DNS or DNS over HTTPS to encrypt your DNS queries as well. So in a nutshell, if you follow these 8 steps, your devices, your computers, your applications are going to be as secure as possible. Moving on to question number 4. What are the different sources of malware? Now, malware stands for malicious software, right? Malware is basically a software that poses as a legitimate software but has a payload of a Trojan, virus, spyware, keylogger, or some malicious software that is going to have a negative impact on security of your particular device. So the question here is, what are the different sources of malware? We want to identify the most common sources through which malwares infect end user devices in today's world. And we can start with pop-up ads. So most of the websites, if you're visiting untrusted sites, if you're being redirected to sites that you don't know about, there'll be a lot of pop-ups coming your way where it says you're the 1 millionth visitor to this site. Please click here to download your gift. Or it will say, congratulations on winning a particular product for visiting this page, and so on and so forth. There are some instances where you can see a banner which is flashing at you on top of the page and says that there are 8 infections that have been identified on your computer. Click here to download an antivirus to clean the infections. So all of these pop-ups are there as a social engineering attack, as a phishing attack, to make gullible people click on those links and download those malwares. Now, the software that is posing as a security software itself can be a malicious software which is going to install a Trojan or a virus or a bot on your machine, compromising the security of that machine. The second is removable media, USBs. And humans have a fascination with USBs. So if you find a USB lying around, it's a free USB, you get excited about it, and you want to take it home, you want to plug it into a machine and see what's on the USB. Worst case scenario, you format it and you've got a free USB to utilize. Higher the capacity, the better. But that is one of the most easiest way people use malwares to be deployed on unsuspecting users. If there is a USB lying around, why would somebody want to forget a USB? It's most likely planted over there as a social engineering attack so that a gullible person is going to pick it up, plug it into their device. If the device is not secured enough, it is going to install the malware, right? Then documents and executable files. This is where your viruses and all those creeps in. So let's say you're surfing on the internet, you're looking for a software, and you find the software on a particular website. You do not verify the trustworthiness of that site, and you just download and install that software. Now that software could be malware as well. Thus, if you're surfing on the internet, you're downloading files from different locations, you have to research the website, you have to research the source to ensure that it is trustworthy, and only then are you going to download and execute those files. Thus, internet downloads as well. And when we say internet downloads, it's not just untrustworthy sites. We go to torrents, we go to the dark web or the deep web, and we are searching for other softwares, especially those who are researching security, right? We are always on the lookout of new softwares, and we are always on those forums which may not be so much trustworthy, and we just download those files and start installing them. That is a very bad scenario, right? So you have to be very careful what you're downloading from the internet. Your antiviruses, your anti-phishing mechanisms, your threat intelligence mechanisms, have those mechanisms installed, and you want to verify where your downloads are coming from. Then your network connections. If it is a P2P connection, it is a local area network connection or a metropolitan area network. You have to verify which devices are connected to your machines, and you have to validate those connections before you want to trust those devices and before you connect to them. If you're on a public Wi-Fi, you probably don't want to connect to a public Wi-Fi in the first place. Then comes email attachments. There are so many attachments that come across in today's world, most of them in a zip format or a RAR format. Some of them come as document files where there are macros hidden within them. Macros are scripts that are recognized by Microsoft Office files, right? And then finally, there are these malicious advertisements that we find online, right? Let it be Facebook, let it be WhatsApp, let it be any social media platform that you go, or even your search engines. Their job is to display ads. Their job is not to verify whether the ad is legit or not. It is for us as consumers to be careful and validate that ad and verify whether it is a genuine ad or not. So just don't start clicking on any of the ad, trusting the platform that you're on. Be sure that you are investigating that ad. So these are the most common sources of malware, and the end user will always get infected by one of these mechanisms. Then moving on to question number 5, how does email work? Now this is a very can be a complex question, but we have to keep it as simple as possible, and we have to identify that there are two servers, both of them either using SMTP, which is the simple message transfer protocol, where in this scenario John wants to send an email. Thus, they've got an email client installed on their machine, which is connected to the mail exchange server, which has a DNS server which maps the routing and which maps the exchange server and inboxes. So when John composes that message and clicks on send, John should be connected to a mail exchange server where the email is sent through that particular person's inbox. So John's inbox will then be validated, and that email will then be sent through the DNS server through the internet and will be received by the recipient mail server. So at this point in time, John also requires the recipient's email address. So in this case, this is Jack. So jack@something.com would be the email address. So while John is composing, the to field will have Jack's email address. The from field will have John's email address. The subject field will have whatever they want to convey as a message. The message body will have the message itself. And then when John clicks on send, it will go to their exchange server. The exchange server will then validate the inbox and identify where that inbox is located for Jack. And then through the internet, it will be sent to the mail server of Jack. The mail server will then identify the proper inbox that that email needs to be sent to, and it will store that email in that particular inbox. When Jack opens their computer and accesses their inbox, this email from John will be already waiting for them, and they can respond to it the same way John had sent that email. Moving on to question number 6, what is black box and white box testing? So when you are testing a software or you're testing your infrastructure, there are two different tests that you can conduct. The first one is a black box. The second one is a white box. In a black box test, there is no knowledge that is shared with the tester. So let's say you're an ethical hacker and you have been awarded a contract by an organization to test their current application that they have developed. Now, they are not going to give you any information. They are not going to tell you what the application is. They just probably give you an IP address and a port number where the application is hosted. And now you have to fire in your own queries and try to figure out what the application is, try to gather information, see what information can be gathered in the first place. And based on that, you're going to figure out your way, identify vulnerabilities, and see if any of those vulnerabilities can lead to an security incident. So without any knowledge, zero knowledge of the IT infrastructure or the source code, that's a black box attack or a black box test. A white box test, on the other hand, is where full knowledge of the IT infrastructure or the source code is shared. So the ethical hacker has complete knowledge, and based on the knowledge, they are then going to test out the system to see if there are any flaws that they can identify, right? So why would these two audits be important? Because the first one, a black box audit, emulates the attack of an outsider, an external hacker sitting outside the organization trying to figure their way in. Whereas a white box attack can emulate the attack of an insider. So a disgruntled employee within that organization misusing their access controls or their access rights to make unvalidated profits, right? So somebody who's corrupt, who has been bribed, who wants to sell out company secrets so they're going to try to find out vulnerabilities, try to steal data and try to sell it on the gray market, right? So a white box would emulate an internal attack, a black box would emulate an external attack. The next question is, what are the steps involved in hacking a server or a network? So this is more of an ethical hacking question. You're looking at devices, and the interviewer asks you what kind of steps are involved. What are the activities that you would do in hacking a server or a network? Now, there are no specific steps that you would define because every hack is going to be unique. But it has a hack can be classified in 5 different steps, which are quite generic, right? So the first step will always be the reconnaissance step, also known as information gathering phase, also known as footprinting or fingerprinting, depending on what exactly you're doing. But in this phase, the attacker gathers all the evidence, all the information that is possible about the targets that they want to attack. So here you're trying to get to know the victim so you can launch specific attacks towards them. You want to identify what operating system they are utilizing, what IP addresses, MAC addresses, the versions of the operating systems and applications, the patch levels, find out vulnerabilities, find out whatever information is possible, find out the information about the person who's using those computers so you can launch social engineering attacks and so on and so forth. So the first step is all about gathering enough information based on which you can launch further attacks. Once you have that information comes the second phase, which is known as the scanning phase. This is more of a technical phase. So you have in the first step you've got your IP addresses, domain names, maybe even network maps, and you have identified which devices are available. Now in the scanning phase you're going to identify live devices, and then you're going to scan them for open ports, processes, protocols, services. You're going to identify vulnerabilities. You're going to enumerate them to identify more information from them. Thus, at this point in time, you will have identified a certain set of vulnerabilities or a certain set of security loopholes that you can misuse. Once you have identified those, you're going to the next step, which is the gaining access step. In this, you're actually going to execute your attacks based on the vulnerabilities that you have found, and you're either going to gain access to that particular system by installing a Trojan, or destroy the system by installing a virus, or install a spyware or a keylogger, whatever you wanted to achieve. So in the gaining access phase, you would have, based on the knowledge that you have gained in the first and the second phase, you're going to launch your attacks and you're going to try to gain access to that particular device. Then the next step is where you're going to maintain that access. Now that you have hacked into that device, it is not necessary that you will always be able to get access to that device. Suppose you have cracked the password of that particular user and the user changes that password after a few days. Your attack is worthless. So what you're going to do here is you're going to maintain your access. So this is where it is assumed that you want repeated access to that device, and thus you're going to install a keylogger or a Trojan or some mechanism which will still allow you to get access to that device without the knowledge or the authorization of that particular user. And finally, the last step is where you're going to cover your tracks. So whatever activity that you have done so far will have created logs and will have created information based on which the victim will come to know that they have been compromised and may be able to trace that activity back to you. So to prevent the user or the victim from realizing that they have been hacked, and to prevent them to discover who has hacked them, you want to cover your tracks by deleting logs and any references that point to that particular activity. You're going to hide the files that you have created. So you have installed a Trojan or a keylogger. These will create files and directories. You're going to hide them so that they are not discovered. You're going to hide processes that have been created. You're going to try to hide all the activity that you have done so that to conceal the actual attack and preventing the user from realizing that they have been compromised. So these are the 5 steps that will be involved in hacking a server, network, application, or any computing device you'll come across. The next question refers to what are the various sniffing tools. Now this is a network-based attack where you're trying to capture data packets that are being transmitted over the network, and then you're going to analyze them to see if you can capture any sensitive information like usernames, passwords, bank details, or anything of that sort. Now, these tools would also depend on which operating system you're utilizing. For example, MSN Sniffer would work on Microsoft operating systems. EtherCap would be based on Linux, and so on and so forth. So on the screen, you'll see 6 different sniffing tools that work on different operating systems. Wireshark is something that is common both on Windows and Linux. It is used to analyze network in detail. It is the de facto tool that you will come across in most of your ethical hacking trainings, in most of your organizations when they want to do data captures. Now, data capturing or packet capturing is not only done by hackers to gather more information, but it is also a known troubleshooting technique used by administrators and network administrators to analyze any issues that may be going on in the network, right? So the first tool you see on the screen is Wireshark. Like we stated, is available for Windows, Linux as well. Then there is TCP dump, which again has the same capability of Wireshark, but is a command line version, whereas Wireshark also has a GUI, a graphical user interface. TCP dump is available on Linux. MSN Sniffer, it's a very old tool. When we had MSN Messengers, MSN Messenger is no longer there, but Microsoft does or did have a Microsoft Message Analyzer tool, which they have stopped development since 2015. But that's another tool that is specific for Microsoft operating systems from Microsoft that can be installed to gather more information. Then you've got EtherCap, which is a tool to launch man-in-the-middle attacks, data capturing, and is essentially a Linux command line based tool. Then DSniff is another password and network capturing tool which can help you capture data packets, prominently a Linux tool. Same with Iterate. This is a graphical tool which will allow you to capture data traffics and map protocols and identify which IP addresses have been communicating with what. Essentially, all of the tools have similar functionality, except that some have additional functionality like launching man-in-the-middle attacks or capturing or having specific filters that will help you identify and troubleshoot some network issues that you may be facing. Question 9.
What is SQL injection? SQL stands for structured query language, which is a language that is used by most of your databases or your relational databases. The variations of your database would be MySQL, Microsoft SQL, Oracle SQL. You'll have IBM databases. All of these databases utilize the structured query languages to interact with the applications. Now, all of these databases have their own syntax, so you'll have to study most of these databases based on which applications and which databases you want to provide security for. But as the name suggests, SQL injection vulnerability or a structured query language injection vulnerability is where a user can maliciously inject a SQL input or a SQL statement in a query and send it to the database and evoke a response out of it. So this vulnerability is not specifically to the database. The vulnerability lies more in the application and the coding of that application. So when the application receives a query which it needs to be forwarded to the SQL database, we need to configure at the application level of what queries are allowed and what queries are not allowed. So there are different various aspects of how to manage a SQL injection vulnerability. But the basic flaw lies in the application where invalidated input is accepted and sent forward to the database, where the database might confuse it into an executable statement and thus create a response that was not warranted. There are various types of SQL injections as shown on the screen. Inbound SQL injection, where you can look at an error-based or a union-based injection. A blind SQL injection, where it is either Boolean-based or a time-based attack. And then an out-of-bound SQL injection. Essentially, you're looking at databases and you're looking at application security, where you want to encourage secure coding practices so unvalidated input is mitigated. Then the next question is, what is spoofing? Now in spoofing, you're basically assuming the identity of another person. So here the attacker pretends to be some other person or an organization and sends you an email that appears to be a legitimate email. It looks almost genuine. It has been constructed to replicate what a genuine email would have been, and it is very difficult to spot a fake one. There are different ways to identify whether an email is genuine or not.
If getting your learning started is half the battle, what if you could do that for free? Visit SkillUp by Simplilearn. Click on the link in the description to know more.
Moving on to the next question, what is a distributed denial of service attack or a DDoS attack? Now, generally a denial of service attack is an attack where legitimate users are prevented access to the resources that they legitimately can access, right? So, for example, if it is a bandwidth-based attack, the attacker consumes the bandwidth of the network in such a way that there is no more bandwidth left for legitimate users to access the network. Now, a single device may not be able to generate that much amount of traffic to consume the bandwidth of a huge server. Thus, the attacker will construct a botnet and through that botnet they will launch a distributed denial of service attack to the target victim, right? So a botnet, there are two terms that we want to look at over here. The first term is a bot, and the second one being the botnet itself. Bot is a software that once installed on a victim's machine allows the hacker to send remote commands to that machine that will make it do generate some activity. Once we have enough machines on which such bots have been implemented, the collection of these machines would be known as a botnet. So an attacker would then instruct this entire botnet to start generating data traffic to be sent to the targeted network or to the targeted server, which will then bog down the server, thus crashing it and preventing users from accessing that particular resource. The next question is how to avoid ARP poisoning or ARP. Now, first let's understand what ARP is. ARP stands for Address Resolution Protocol, which is a protocol used by computers to communicate over the network. Once your computer boots up, it starts a discovery process of identifying its neighbors. So if I'm in a particular subnet, my machine will proactively send out ARP requests, an address resolution protocol, to find out which other machines are within the same network and which are live. Once it sends out a query, a live machine will respond to that query along with its MAC address. This information is then stored in what is known as a ARP table or an ARP table on the machine's cache. So whenever my machine now wants to send out a packet to this particular machine, it will go to the ARP table, it will identify the IP address and the associated MAC address. It will print that onto the data packet as a destination IP and destination MAC and send that packet across to the switch. The switch will then identify the MAC address and send the packet to the relevant machine that is connected to that particular switch. Now, to confuse the switch into sending it to a different machine, ARP poisoning attack is created. This attack is generally launched to create a man-in-the-middle attack. Now, to prevent this ARP poisoning from happening in the first place, there are three different aspects that we can utilize. First, we can use packet filtering, which will filter out and block packets that have the same source address data. So you have identified some malicious IP addresses and you want to block out some IP addresses. So you're using a packet filter firewall where you have instructed the firewall to filter out certain packets originating from particular range of IP addresses. This firewall and this technique will then block those kind of packets coming in. Second, keeping away from trust relationships. Organizations will develop protocols that do not depend on trust relationships, and thus you want to keep this protocol away from there. Once you have created a trust relationship, these machines should not be sending out ARP requests to other machines in the first place. Since the trust relationship has been defined and these machines know whom to communicate with, such kind of protocols should then be disabled. Or you can use an ARP spoofing software. So there are softwares out there that will look for ARP spoofing and prevent that from happening in the first place. So if somebody has sent out a spoofed ARP packet, that packet will be picked up by this software and it will be mitigated. Network visualizers like Glasswire, antiviruses like Sophos, they have inbuilt capabilities of identifying ARP spoofing attacks and mitigate them in the first place. In the next question, we are going to discuss what is ransomware. Now, ransomware is a type of malware that blocks victims to access personal files and demands ransom to regain access. There are three categories. Before we go into the categories, let's just revisit what ransomware is. Let's start with the word malware. Malware is a malicious software that poses as a legitimate software but has a payload that will have a security impact on your machine. So in this instance, viruses, trojans, all of these can be classified under malwares. So can ransomwares. A Trojan is a software that will give you a backdoor access to a particular device. A virus will do some destructive activity on that device. A ransomware will basically encrypt the data of that particular user on that particular machine, thus rendering that data inaccessible to the users themselves. And in turn will demand a ransom to provide access to that particular data. So the three types of ransomwares, the first one is scareware, which uses social engineering to cause anxiety or the perception of a threat to manipulate users into buying unwanted software. So this preys on the gullibility of humans, where you can see a pop-up appearing on your screen which can scare you into believing that you may have been attacked or there is a virus on your machine, and then instructs you to download a particular software to mitigate that particular virus. Now, the malware will be in this software that you will be downloading, and then a ransomware will be installed and your data will be encrypted. Screen lockers, where locking users' computers by preventing them from logging in and displaying an official looking message. You will see a screensaver once you boot up, which prevents you from accessing the login page, so it will not allow you to log into your own machine, but it will give you a warning that your data has been encrypted and you need to connect to a particular email address and send bitcoins over there to get a decryption key to access your own data. And then the encrypting ransomware displays a message demanding payment in return for the private asymmetric key, which is needed to decrypt the symmetric keys for encrypted file. So once your files have been encrypted, you might just have a blank screen in front of you where you'll receive a warning message where it instructs you to pay up a ransom in bitcoins or in some cryptocurrency to some particular digital e-wallet which is not traceable. And once you make that payment, they will send you the decryption key and then you can access your data. Then talking about the next question, what is the difference between an active and a passive cyber attack? Now, when we talk about cyber attack is activity that is caused by a malicious user who wants to try to get access or do some security incidents on the victim's devices. So there are two ways that can happen. It's either in an active manner or a passive manner. In an active manner, the intruder attempts to disrupt a network's normalcy, modifies data, and tries to alter the system's resources. So this is more active, where the attacker will proactively try to destroy the network so that communications fail, or they might try to modify the data where we're using a ransomware they can encrypt it, or they might delete that data using a virus, or steal that data using a Trojan, or they might even alter the data so that it is no longer trustworthy. Whereas in a passive attack, the intruder intercepts data traveling through a network. Here, the intruder eavesdrops but does not modify the message. So they're just listening in, they're just observing what is going on. They're not manipulating the data, they're not stealing anything. It's just that they are monitoring the activity that's going on. Then the next question, what is a social engineering attack? Now, social engineering attack is a people-based attack. The victim here is the human by itself. The vulnerability also lies in the human. It may be executed through a computer, but end of the day, the gullibility is of the human. So it is the art of manipulating people so that they end up giving up confidential information. Now, we always read in the papers where somebody got manipulated, their passwords got hacked, and somebody's life savings got wiped out, right? Because they shared the OTP with someone or they shared the password with someone. Now, creating a scenario where these people will fall prey to this attack and share this kind of personal information to unknown people, that is where the social engineering attack comes in. Creating that scenario which will ensure that these people give out this confidential information. Now, there are three categories in this attack. The first one is a phishing attack, second is a spear phishing attack, and a third is a veiling attack. Now, phishing attack is basically a generic attack. It is targeted to the world at large. Whoever falls prey to that attack will be a victim. Whereas a spear phishing attack is a targeted attack towards a specific individual or a group of individuals or towards an organization. So there is a lot more research that goes into spear phishing, where you analyze the victim, you try to figure out what their vulnerabilities are, and you tailor make or you customize the attack to that particular vulnerability. Once you have that attack, you launch it against those people will then fall prey to this attack. And a veiling attack is where you're attacking top level executives. So the C-level executives of an organization, politicians, movie stars, wealthy and powerful people. So any of these people, when they're attacked, it will be known as a veiling attack. Next question, what is man-in-the-middle attack? Now, this is something that we had touched base when we talked about ARP, where the ARP poisoning attack needs to be executed to leverage a man-in-the-middle attack. Now, in the man-in-the-middle attack, the attacking computer takes the IP address of the client Unaware of this, the server continues to communicate with the attacker. Now, if you remember in a previous question, we have also talked about spoofing. So in this scenario, attacker has spoofed their IP address to replicate themselves as a genuine client. And now with that spoofing in mind, they might either through a ARP poisoning attack or just because of the spoofed IP address become a man in the middle. That means that they are now eavesdropping on the conversation between the actual client and the server by posing themselves as a server. In this scenario, the attacker is now a go-between between the client and the server and can eavesdrop and can copy the data. If they want, they can modify the data as well. So as you can see on the screen, the attacker becomes man in the middle, which means that they are now eavesdropping on the conversation that is happening between the client and the server. The next question, who are black hat hackers and white hat hackers? The main thing is the differentiation between a black hat hacker and a white hat hacker. Now, a black hat hackers are skilled individuals who illegally hack into a system. The motive behind such an attack is mostly for monetary gain. These individuals are also known as security crackers. Now, if you look at your criminal hackers, those who have malicious intent, those who do hacking for the intent of personal gain or for the matter of disruption. The main thing that black hat hackers lack is authorization. They are not authorized to do the activity that they are about to do, and they are going to get unauthorized access to devices or to data, which is going to cause losses to the organization involved. Whereas on the other side, a white hat hacker are also known as ethical hackers. These are the individuals who discover vulnerabilities in a computer network, and they help the organizations mitigate these vulnerabilities. They help the organizations defend themselves from black hat hackers. So the main difference between these two types of hackers, a black hat and a white hat, is the intent and the authorization. So black hat hackers will have malicious intent. They will try to personally gain from that attack by finding out vulnerabilities. They also will not have authorization to conduct whatever activity they are doing. Whereas on the other side, white hat hackers will be hired by organizations. They will provide authorization for certain activity that the white hat hacker can do to find out those vulnerabilities. Once those vulnerabilities have been found out by the white hat hacker, they will report it to the management and guide them in implementing security controls to mitigate those vulnerabilities. The main difference between a black hat and a white hat is the authorization and the intent. The next question, what are honeypots? Now, honeypots are a very interesting device that can be introduced in a network. These basically are decoy servers that are implemented in a network to attract the attention of an attacker. It is there to lure an attacker into attacking that particular device, thus creating a security blanket for the rest of the devices. So if an attacker has been able to bypass a firewall and is now trying to scan a particular network, when they scan, they will come across various devices that are there in the network. They will then proceed to do a vulnerability scan on these devices. The honeypot at that point in time will provide as prove as an attraction to these attackers because it will demonstrate some vulnerabilities to the hacker, which will divert their attention. So these vulnerabilities are simulated on these devices. These actually do not exist. But the moment the attacker then starts interacting with the honeypot will identify that as a malicious traffic and will warn the administrator about a possible attack that is going on. The administrator will then investigate through the honeypot of what activity is going on and then reconfigure their security controls to block the attacker or mitigate the attack itself. Right? So it is more of a decoy server that will showcase or simulate some vulnerabilities to an attacker, thus to lure them and safeguard the rest of the network.
Moving on to the next question, define cryptography, encryption and decryption. Now, cryptography is used by security professionals to scramble data into non-readable format, which is used in securing that information. So it involves converting data from a readable format into a non-readable format and then reversing it back to readable format again. For example, the word computer is now scrambled into looking like an unreadable format. Now, if you look at this word that it has been scrambled into, it would be very difficult for a human to figure out what the actual word was. Now, in this scenario, we have taken an algorithm where we have made a shift of the alphabet, where we have added 2 alphabets to the current one. So C plus 2 becomes E, O plus 2 becomes Q, M plus 2 becomes O. So we have done a shift of 2, and thus the key over here for this algorithm is the alphabet plus 2. So any person who figures that out will be able to unscramble this and convert this back into readable text. The fact of scrambling a readable text data into something that is unreadable by using a particular key is what cryptography is all about. Now, as we discussed, the decryption again is replacing the alphabet and taking it further back by 2 characters. So E minus 2 becomes C, Q minus 2 becomes O, O minus 2 becomes M, and so on and so forth. So anybody who knows this key, the shift key, anybody will able to decrypt this particular character. So this depends on the user. If I want to utilize alphabet plus 5, then the spacing, the shifting of that character will be the 5th character from that particular character, and so on and so forth. And now the last question: what is the difference between ciphertext and clear text? Ciphertext refers to the text which is encrypted and totally undecipherable. The message received after decryption is known as clear text. This text is comprehensible. So the word computer is clear text. That means that it has not been treated to any cryptographic measures. It does what it is intended to be. However, if the moment we encrypt it, that means we scramble it into unreadable text by using any of the algorithms that we'll be looking at, that text is known as a ciphertext. And without the key, this becomes unreadable. The clear text, as discussed, is the plain word that we have utilized. We are using the English language in this instance. So the plain word computer is the clear text. Once we add the encryption layer to it, we get the ciphertext to it. That's it for this particular video. I'll see you in the next. Thank you.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.